Well, this right here sure is a nice Dell setup. We have an OptiPlex, matching accessories from the same era. We even have a soundbar for audio. All that we have to do now is install an operating system. We could install Windows 7, maybe XP. If we're feeling real adventurous, maybe even Vista. No! What are you talking about? Windows. Okay, Windows 7 is honestly excellent, but I have a lot of PCs here that could also run Windows 7. All I see here is a future Macintosh in the works. In today's video, we're going to do something that I've never done before. Hackintoshing a computer. And in this case, it's the Dell OptiPlex 780. Now you might be wondering, considering I already have multiple Mac systems, why even bother with Hackintoshing this when I could just install Windows 7 and call it a day? Well, would you look at that, we already have a second computer here with the exact same case design, which already has Windows 7 installed. Now, even though it could be interesting to have two nearly identical Windows 7 desktops here, I honestly just don't know how often I'd use them. That is, if they're configured together, or if I just have two separate Windows 7 desktops. And because the 780 here has a Core 2 Duo instead of the Pentium in the 380, why not actually try something different with it, like Hackintoshing? The 780 also has more opportunities for upgrades compared to the 380. Now, if you want to see more details about both of these systems, I'll have the video about them linked right up here in the corner. We took a closer look at the systems, the hardware, we also cleaned them up a bit, and now they look really awesome. But today's focus is going to be on the 780 and trying to install OS X Mavericks. This OptiPlex is from 2010, and you might be thinking, with the Core 2 Duo as the CPU, why are we going for Mavericks? Why not install macOS Leopard or even Snow Leopard? Well, the short answer is, Mavericks is awesome, and why not? It's also not like the Core 2 Duo systems were obsolete by the time Mavericks came out. I mean, this desktop was only 3 years old when Mavericks was released, and the Core 2 Duo systems could easily run even newer versions of macOS, whether it be officially supported or unofficially patched onto the hardware. It's actually pretty funny to think that in most cases, others would probably try to run the newest version of Windows or even a newer version of macOS if you're trying to Hackintosh a system like this. But in this case, we're going with 10.9 Mavericks from 2013 because, like I said before, Mavericks is awesome. It's the last one to have the classic macOS skeuomorphic design, so it'll go really well alongside the other retro Macs in the setup here. And this will actually be the most up-to-date system in this current area in terms of the Macs. Now, I do have Macs with newer versions, such as 10.10 Yosemite, and even Big Sur on my Mac Mini. I know, crazy, right? But it'll be nice to have a little bit more software support if for some reason I do need it. But the main use case I have for the OptiPlex is to actually use this kind of like a macOS server. I know, hilarious, right? Using a Dell desktop, a slim form factor one, as a server for macOS. You might be thinking, you have a G5 and a Mac Pro, why not just use those as the dedicated server? Well, you see, I'm kind of already doing that in the first place. I'm using the G5 with a dedicated partition on the hard drive for PowerPC era applications, utilities, stuff like that basically. And the Mac Pro gets even more usage with the same type of use case in terms of applications, utilities, but for early Intel or universal applications. And it also serves as the iTunes system. We have macOS installers. All of that stuff is on the Mac Pro, and it works extremely well. But in terms of the macOS programs and utilities, I want to try and offload this onto the Dell itself because we have it. Why not at least try to make use of it in that way? So not only would this be a cool way to try out Hackintoshing a system, it would also give us a good use case for the Dell here and actually put it into service. Now, of course, I could just go to Internet Archive or Macintosh Garden and download the same application or utility on the system itself, but if it's on one machine, I don't have to re-download the same thing over and over again, and it also means that it's all in one spot, so it wouldn't be on the G5 or the Mac Pro, and I don't necessarily need to have those systems on if I'm working on something else and I want to access some old Mac apps. Now, I will say that this only has a 250 gigabyte hard drive. I think that for now, it'll be more than enough. And in terms of larger things like macOS installers, I'm still going to keep it on the Mac Pro itself. In general, it just sounds like a really cool idea. I can't wait to implement it. Hopefully we can actually Hackintosh this in the first place. But what's nice about the OptiPlex 780 is that when I did some research about how to actually do this in the first place, there's a dedicated guide all about the 780 here. Now, I'm not expecting it to be as easy as a Macintosh install, but I guess we just have to wait and see. In order to actually get started with the Hackintosh, though, we kinda need a Mac because macOS is still macOS. How else are you gonna make the installer? If only there was a great resource with information on how to actually make a Hackintosh. Wow! Hackintosh.com. Very cool. It's really cool to see an entire website all about this. I mean, it's called Hackintosh.com. It's literally in the URL name. There's a lot of information for both modern and retro Macintosh systems. So we have everything from macOS Leopard all the way up to macOS Sequoia. Now this may change depending on when you're actually watching this video, but that really doesn't matter because we're looking at macOS Mavericks, which hasn't been updated in forever, but honestly that has some advantages because that means we won't have to worry about future updates breaking things. I took a look at some of the information here and it seems like there's a very cool utility called MyHack. There's a guide here on MacBreaker and it explains how to actually install Mavericks with MyHack. Now this is from back in the day, from 2013, and what's really cool about this website is that it seems like it's kind of stuck in the past, but I say that in a good way because it actually matches my macOS Lion install with the linen background here. We also have a Wayback Archive of MyHack here, the actual website. It seems like this is not online anymore. This is an archive from 2018, and this says it was last updated in 2013. And I believe the website itself isn't even online anymore, so you can really only access it with the Wayback Machine. But fortunately we can, and it also does match the older styling of macOS here, so it's very cool to see that. And lastly, this is something that I found out separately. It's not on the guide because this is specific to the Dell machine that we have here, but it's literally an entire guide on how to install Mavericks onto a Dell OptiPlex 780. Now, I'm not going to follow this entire guide here because we're using MyHack and this specifies using something else. But the nice part about this guide is that there's actually an entire install file here which has drivers to make Mavericks actually usable on the system. Now, I'm pretty sure you also have to download this with the Internet Archive because this does not work anymore. Now, I'm not going to do a step-by-step process about the entire guide here on the website. You can see more information on Hackintosh.com if you want to check it out yourself, but we're still going to take a look at actually making the installer in the first place. I mean, based on what I see here, it really is just a plug-and-play solution, which is kind of crazy because this is a Hackintosh, not an actual Macintosh. We have Mavericks right here. I opened up the installer so we have it ready, and we're going to be installing this on the external Seagate hard drive because, well, I mean, there's nothing on it right now and it does work, so why not? But to set up MyHack here, we just have to type in our password. It will not work if you have no password on the user account. You do have to have something. Now there's a lot of options here, but we want to select Create OS X Installer, and what's nice about MyHack is that you can make a variety of different installers. It's not just for Mavericks. So you can make one for Mountain Lion, Lion, even Snow Leopard. So we're going to select OK, and we do not want to rewrite over iTunes here, so we're going to select our Untitled drive. And in case you're wondering, OS X Mavericks here is the actual installer. It's not a USB flash drive or anything. It's just this on the hard drive itself. After that, we continue. Now you can select it so it finds it automatically, but considering we know where it is, we're just going to select Browse Manually. It's really awesome to see these older macOS applications because even after all this time, it still works. Make sure to have everything backed up. Now we just click on OK and we wait. As you can see, the drive itself has been removed from the desktop. It's repartitioning it to be a MyHack install drive, and of course Time Machine popped up here. Because this is running on FireWire, it should hopefully be a very fast install process. So it has transferred everything, but now it's doing a second step to the install process. It'll still take a while because it basically takes the installer and modifies it to actually install MyHack alongside it. Now at this point, it's asking us if we want MBR support. Now this is if you already have Windows installed on the machine, but considering we're just going to have a Mavericks install with nothing else, then we don't need to have this. We're just going to use GUID, which is what macOS itself uses. So we're just going to select no. And just like that, the installer is now ready to go. It looks like a pretty standard installer for Mavericks until you notice that My Hack is right next to it. With the Mac software side of things out of the way, we got to make sure that the OptiPlex itself is actually ready to be used as a Hackintosh. We have to power up the OptiPlex and go into the BIOS because there are a couple of things that we have to change in order for macOS to properly detect it. The first thing that we want to change, which I've already done so, is the boot sequence. We want the USB device to be the first option and the internal hard drive to be the second one. After that, we need to go into drives here, go into SATA operation, and right now it's selected to RAID on, but we want to change this to AHCI because this is what macOS uses. If this is not enabled, it will not see the internal hard drive at all. So we click on yes, and with that, we're actually done with the BIOS because that's really all that we have to change. Even though it was really simple to change the options on the OptiPlex here, this is really just hardware dependent. The best thing to do is to see if there's a guide or a tutorial on what to change with your specific hardware configuration. Chances are, if you have a Dell system with a similar BIOS like this is all that you would have to do. But some systems might need even more or even less configuration. So there's no real one-size-fits-all solution in this case. You just have to do your research and see what works best. So now we just Hackintosh it, right? The way it is right now, it should actually just work. We have integrated graphics, the Eagle Lake chipset, and even though it does work, like it will show us macOS, I don't think macOS actually has drivers for this chipset, so we're gonna fix that by actually upgrading the system with the GPU. I got this GPU alongside that Dell OptiPlex. Now, it would be interesting to have a dedicated GPU within the OptiPlex, but I don't have it set up for anything GPU related. I'm not playing any games on the system. Even though the hardware is certainly capable, it has a 4th generation i5 chipset and the integrated graphics are more than enough for now. So that leaves us with this card right here. Besides, this is not really something that you would associate with gaming because it's a GT 730. I did test it out with the OptiPlex 3020 and it does report it as a GT 730 with 2 GB of RAM, which is good because there's a sticker on the back here saying that it is a GT 730. The only weird part about this has always been the NVIDIA sticker, at least to me, because it just looks off. So I don't know if this is like a later release or just some weird version of the card, but the most important thing is that it does work. Whether or not this actually works within macOS, I guess we'll just have to find out. But having a dedicated GPU like this is still going to be better than the integrated chipset. The most important thing though is that this is a low profile graphics card, which means that it'll actually fit within the Dell. But how is this actually going to work if this is for a standard PC? We just swap it out with these right here. Going from the larger card slot to the 2 smaller ones, it will obviously take up 2 card slots, but that's not really a big deal because I don't have anything else to install inside the Dell at the moment, and considering VGA here is an extra on the card with this cable adapter, I kinda need to use the second adapter if I want to use VGA. Using my iFixit toolkit, I was able to easily remove the standoff screws here, so now the end result is technology. It was super easy to swap these over, and now it actually matches the low profile graphics card. As for this, I'll keep it safe. I'll put it off to the side, just like the other plates here, because we may need to use this again in the future, whether it be for this graphics card or for another one, or maybe if we have a card that doesn't even have a plate in the first place. Now this is a real ultimate gaming PC upgrade. Installation should be pretty easy. We just need to remove these 2 panel pieces. We may need to remove this entire piece right here, but I guess we just have to see how much room we have to work with. Check this out. The ultimate gaming machine right here. A Core 2 Duo with a GT 730. It sure doesn't get any better than this, right? And around the back here we have DVI, HDMI. I'm still using VGA because, well, it works, okay? I have a lot of VGA cables, I have a lot of monitors that can use VGA, and as for the blank plates, I will also have these off to the side with the other adapter for the GPU because we still want to keep these safe if we have to reinstall these in the future. We do things real fancy around here. We only use gold USB cables to install macOS on our soon-to-be Macintosh. Dude, you're getting a Macintosh! You know, it would actually help if you plugged in the Macintosh in the first place. So we do have video, and we'll go into the boot options here. It does detect a USB device, and I still have to change the system battery, but whatever, we'll just continue. And it looks like we have My Hack right here, and it even detects the NVIDIA GPU. And we have an Apple logo. Our Dell is one step closer to becoming a Hackintosh. So as soon as it seemed to actually work, it stopped. Now it does show the Apple logo. We know that the GPU does work, but it seems like a GPU issue and the installer just not having the proper drivers or something like that, because, well, it just goes into sleep mode at a certain point, and I tried to load it up with extra commands on startup such as safe mode, graphics enabler. None of that made a difference. So we're actually going to switch to the integrated graphics to at least install macOS, and then later on we'll see if we can actually install the proper NVIDIA drivers. Even though integrated graphics will not be the best solution, at least it'll be better than no video at all. So it'll still output video on the integrated graphics, but because it detects a graphics card within the PCIe card slot, it just complains. So with the GPU out of the system for now, we can power up the OptiPlex again. Here it mentions the Eagle Lake graphics chipset. We do have the Apple logo, which is a good sign. We have a mouse cursor. It's actually loading. Just got my new Mac Pro. I don't know why it says Dell, but as you can see, we have Mac OS here. And would you look at that? Install OS 10. Before we continue though, we need to open up Disk Utility and format the hard drive because, well, we kind of need it to be formatted for Macintosh. So fortunately, it does show up here within Disk Utility, which means that the changes we made in the BIOS actually worked. And I think I'll call this OptiPlex Server because it's an OptiPlex and it'll act like a server. macOS Extended Journaled, OptiPlex Server, and now, if everything else goes as planned, we should have Mavericks very soon. Of course, we read the entire thing, so we'll agree. OptiPlex Server, and install. And around the end of the installation here, My Hack will actually show up asking us about some extra features. And in fact, if we take a look at utilities, My Hack is actually here. Up until now, the install has been pretty standard, but here we have My Hack again. This is for installing an extras folder. Now, if you are doing like an upgrade from an installation, you would have a custom one right here, basically just one you've been using before, but considering this is a fresh install, we are just using a generic one. We even have notifications here, which is very cool. And it's also asking us if we want to remove these extra files. It gives some more information about the specific files here, but otherwise, we just remove these. Now this is awesome. The install was successful. I might actually have to restart this because if it's using the USB device again, which is probably what's happening here, we're just going back into the installer. So I was going to just restart the system, but we could actually select the new install directly from the actual Mavericks installer. It makes sense that it doesn't work, but I still wanted to try this out because this is still the first time I'm doing Hackintosh things. But yeah, it said in the BIOS that the USB device is the first one, not the hard drive. So yeah, we just have to shut this down and unplug the USB cable because otherwise we'll just continue booting up into the installer here. Welcome! In just a few steps, you can register and set up your Mac. It's official! We now have a Hackintosh! Even though we're at the setup and it is running off of the internal hard drive, we still have some work to do once we're at the desktop because we still need to finish up with all the drivers. But for now, we can just pretend like it's a normal Macintosh and go through the setup. We'll click on Continue. Now we don't have any networking drivers, so for now we'll just click on We do not connect to the internet. Don't transfer anything. And we'll probably call this something like Dell OptiPlex, OptiPlex Server. Now because the internal hard drive is called OptiPlex Server, I think that OptiPlex 780 is different, but similar enough to have for the home folder and the account name. This way we can easily differentiate between one and the other. Now that is awesome. This is super cool. Mavericks on the OptiPlex, and it's not just a JPEG, it is the real deal. So it just says OS 10 here, but we do have 10.9.5 installed. We have our Core 2 Duo right here with 4 GB of RAM, But if we go into system information here and we look at the graphics, you can see that we have a whopping 3 megabytes of VRAM. Yeah, we really need to take care of these drivers here, but the fact that it's able to actually load this without a problem is still pretty cool to see. You can see the screen actually redraw in real time, but it still looks surprisingly nice. You can really see the lag here when you open up Launchpad. Yeah, I've never actually seen macOS run this bad. I know that I've been calling them drivers, but I think they're actually technically called kernel extensions for macOS. But apart from graphics, we also have to fix networking because we do not have Ethernet at all. And we also don't have any sound output devices. We need the kernel extensions for both of these, but like I mentioned earlier, because there's the awesome helpful guide on how to actually set up a 780 as a Hackintosh, we have those extension files. I will say that there are tools like MultiBeast. In this case for Mavericks, it's MultiBeast 6, which has all the different drivers that you could possibly need for setting up a system like this. And even though it can be helpful if you don't have anything at all, generally it's nicer to know what you specifically need for your hardware configuration, so that way you know it'll actually work. I have it all on this flash drive right here. We just need to transfer it over to the desktop. I have also installed the NVIDIA drivers again on the flash drive, so maybe we can actually use our GPU instead of just the integrated chipset. With these copied onto the hard drive, we can eject the flash drive, and I do have multiple installers on this, which is why it looks a bit messy. It's really nice to have this folder here because it contains everything that we could possibly need to make a custom macOS installer for the OptiPlex. Now, because we obviously have macOS running in the first place, all that we really need are the kernel extensions. In this case, Apple Intel for Ethernet and Voodoo for audio. Now, I don't think I necessarily need these three, which are for power management and things like that. I've noticed that the CPU itself seems to be working just fine. It's not maxing out all the time or anything like that. But I will say that I found out with sleep mode here, it does this. The screen is still technically on. We do have the mouse cursor, but I guess it's technically in sleep. It will immediately wake up once you actually press a button or something. And I don't want to install these immediately in case something actually happens, if something gets overwritten and it just stops booting. But it's not really that important right now because this is still going to be kind of like a server, and if it's on most of the time, at least when I'm actively using it, it's not very likely that I'm going to put it into sleep mode. How do we actually install these though? Within the same installer folder that I have, we have a kernel extension utility, and it's as simple as taking the extension folders, dragging them onto the utility, and installing them. And after one quick restart, we now have audio. I've also taken the Ethernet cable from the G5 and I temporarily hooked it up to the OptiPlex here. We can see that the internet is successfully working. It's also really awesome to see that the front LEDs do actually work here. So we have the hard drive LED, and we even have an LED indicator for Ethernet. If we go back into system preferences here and we select sound, so we actually have some pretty cool attention to detail here. Plus, it also detects the AirPlay compatible devices here because it is of course connected to the local network. It can see all the different airports. At this point, if we reinstall the GPU, it's entirely possible that macOS will detect it and it'll work without a problem. This computer is not compatible with the NVIDIA WebDriver. I think the reason why is because this thinks it's an iMac, not a Mac Pro, and this specifies that it's for Mac Pro drivers. The GPU is reinstalled, and I also swapped out the clock battery here for one that actually works. So instead of it complaining all the time, it'll actually remember the settings and the real time and date. So we do have video, we have the Apple logo, and it goes into sleep mode. Or not even sleep mode, it just doesn't display video. Even with DVI, we still have the same problem here. I spent some time trying to figure out what's actually going on with the GPU problem here. I first saw that Mavericks itself may have some issues when it comes to the 730, but I also saw that within the Dell Utilities folder, we also had some extra applications, such as the Chameleon bootloader. Now that tool is designed to help you with the specific information all about it, so you can change things such as what kind of Mac it is, and of course, without doing any research, I decided to try and modify that to see if I can trick the system to act as a Mac Pro to see if I could install the NVIDIA drivers. And I actually made some progress. The system is now boot looping, And here you can actually see the Chameleon bootloader itself. But yeah, I adjusted some things and the system is now not happy. But I guess that's part of the Hackintosh experience, right? Now hear me out. Maybe, just maybe, it would be a good idea to do some research and not break your macOS install. Is that crazy? All things considered though, I'm not mad at this. I'm actually quite happy to see that we got this far in the first place. It was cool to see macOS load up on a Dell OptiPlex, and we definitely know a lot more about Hackintoshing than we did previously, which was nothing, because, like I said, I've never done anything Hackintosh related, so I'm glad that I was able to bring you guys along for the journey here. But I can tell that there is a lot to learn when it comes to Hackintoshing any sort of system. Still though, it was really awesome to see just how plug and play of a solution my hack really is, and considering we can also use it for Mountain Lion, and even Snow Leopard, it is still a really nice resource to have. I know it's not exactly what we planned on ending the video with, considering it's bricked and all, but you know, I still count this as an overall success because, I mean, it did work. My hack was successful. It's just the GPU that was causing issues. I know this might seem a little out of place, but we actually have the GT730 inside the Mac Pro. After recording today's video, I was like, wait, I have a Mac desktop that can actually take expansion cards, so I figured instead of re-recording everything, I would still leave it as is because it is the first initial impressions of Hackintoshing a system. But I installed the GPU in the Mac Pro here just to see what would happen. And what do you know? It actually works. I had to boot it up into safe mode and change some of the expansion slot utility speeds. But apart from that, it actually loads video, and it even detects the full 2 GB of RAM. Now, I don't know much about the driver situation here. I don't know if this has compatible drivers for Lion specifically, but it does display video, and this is at least a good proof of concept that we might actually be able to make it work in the Hackintosh, maybe not with Mavericks, but with something like Mountain Lion or older. But at least we know that the GPU actually works under macOS. So I installed some NVIDIA drivers for macOS Lion. I think they're the newest for Lion, although I'm not entirely sure because I haven't really done anything NVIDIA related because we have an ATI Radeon here in the Mac Pro. It still reports it as the same without a specific model number, but it does report the full 2 GB of RAM here, so I'm not entirely sure. It does work. I don't know if we have driver support here, but this is also the expansion slot utility that I was referring about. Essentially, if you have more than one GPU, you can actually select different speeds, so that way you can actually maximize the performance of the GPU. And if you have something like an X1 or an X4 card slot, it'll just use that amount of bandwidth, so that way the GPUs can actually operate at their maximum potential. Now, it's still going to take some time to figure out, but again, at least it does work on the Mac Pro, which is a good sign if we want to get this working on the Hackintosh. As for now, let's go back to the past and wrap up the video. So I think moving forward, I'm going to have to do even more research about this. I spent a lot of time already doing research on Hackintoshing in general, things related to this specific Dell machine, yet somehow the integrated chipset still works. I mean, Eagle Lake graphics is detected by macOS, but the GT730 is not. But don't worry, we are just getting started with this. This is an awesome future Macintosh in the works, and who knows, maybe this will lead to something better in the future. If you enjoyed today's video, then consider leaving a thumbs up, and if you want to see even more content about Macintoshes, Hackintoshes, awesome old technology actually still in use, then consider subscribing. But as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.